Hello and welcome to the Bad Take. My name is Tamara.
And I'm Himal.
Today we are going to talk about digital distractions. As you know, much of what we interact today are digital platforms. So the impact that they have on us and our daily lives and how we get our work done is very profound and very ubiquitous, I think. So while digital devices and platforms can be used to do a lot of good things, they have also been the culprit of stealing away our attention and forcing us on not very healthy, I think, behaviors and habits, I think. So we thought this will be something interesting to talk about, especially given the fact that both of us have also gone through different phases of dealing with digital distraction ourselves, and we've come to terms with some of it. For example, Himal, I remember seeing a post that you made on Facebook a while back. You were asking, is there a way that is there a way to stop becoming slaves to our phones, something like that?
Really, I said that?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it must have come from somewhere, from some personal experience that you thought was, worth exploring.
Yeah, I do feel like I don't know if it's an addiction, but there's this heavy reliance on social media, and like I find myself constantly reaching for my smartphone.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And
not just
uh,
social media, right? When you see your phone lying around
yeah,
and
there's this urge to like grab it
yes,
and see.
exactly.
Even though it makes sense, I guess, when you've posted something and you just kind of like want to just like see if you've got any notifications, just
Yes.
get that hit of dopamine. But sometimes, like, even when you haven't done that, you constantly like
Yeah.
find yourself.
Yeah.
That was becoming a serious problem for me, I think. And I guess I was and I still am looking for ways to kind of overcome that.
It's like your mind doesn't want to turn off. It wants to be stimulated by something all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's also because there's always something to consume, but wherever you look, there are videos, photos, blogs. There's a lot of information on the internet that you can freely access and see for yourself anytime. So this state of being constantly connected, which I personally think is not something to brag about, or is not a virtue.
It's not healthy.
Yeah, is some people take that very seriously, and I think that sometimes leads to a point where they can't really get off that virtual world, and they constantly want to be validated and stimulated by it.
Right.
So the internet has played a huge part in bringing this, I think, relatively new experiential element to our lives. So I want to put this out there. I want to say that most of these distractions are there because of social media.
Meaning.
So all these notifications that you get simulated by, right? They are almost always from like something like Facebook or an Instagram comment that you get or something like that, and that's where you always want to go. If you take, for example, Instagram, which has become hugely popular in the past couple of years, with all the new features that they added, that some people would argue they stole from Snapchat.
The stories.
And all the filters and all that stuff.
No, I think the filters were always there.
Yeah, they were there, but they added like story filters and stuff like that.
Oh,
where
right.
You can
Okay.
add funny stuff.
Oh, right.
Your
You mean
face and stuff.
the
face
okay,
filters.
those.
Yeah. So a platform like that, which has now become hugely popular, always invite people to to go to the app and engage with something. And so I kind of think that most of these distractions are caused by social media.
I think it's these social networking sites are kind of designed to be addictive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's in the algorithm.
Yeah, I think so. That's their incentive, right? To keep people on their platform as long as they can, and then serve that attention towards the advertiser, and there's a whole, like, the model works that way.
I think this really works on YouTube. Like, you watch one video and
Yeah.
then like there's an endless stream of recommendations.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
I don't know how it really works. I don't think they've really gone on record on how it works, but it works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, do we know what exactly is a social media website? Is there a definition that we can probably?
I mean,
Maybe
I
look up.
suppose, yeah. But the thing is, though, like today, for a lot of people, social media sites. I mean, social media is the internet,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, let's look at if you have to define it. Let's.
Okay. So I'm looking at the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of this. It says social media are forms of electronic communication such as websites for social networking and microblogging through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. So this is basically the entirety of the internet, right?
Pretty much. I mean,
On every site serves one or more of these purposes where
Yeah.
people can create content and share with them and comment on them
right.
and engage with them. There's this guy Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a entrepreneur and he's the owner of a huge social media marketing agency. He says social media is just another word for the internet.
Okay.
Social media is the current state of the internet as we know it. So the whole internet is social media.
Is that really accurate, though?
I mean, I could see that.
I mean, a lot of websites do have social elements
Yes.
built into them.
If you really think about it, what all websites try to do is to get people to engage with their content, right?
Right.
And that's why they introduce those social elements.
Okay.
Like people discuss whether YouTube is a social media network, whether
I think YouTube, they're about to introduce a chat feature.
it's already there. Actually.
Oh, it's already
yeah,
there.
I
Okay,
think
right.
it was. They announced it in
Right.
last year's the Google I/O event.
So I guess that answers that question.
Yeah.
Right.
So all these sites are moving towards the social, engagement type of
Interaction,
platform.
yeah.
So I guess we could, with some restriction, say that social media is the internet.
I mean, yeah, it is for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you take my mother, for example, she's in her 60s and she's like the only thing she does on the internet is go on Facebook.
Right.
That's the extent of the internet to her.
Right.
I think that is, I mean, at least in the case of Sri Lanka, I think that's how it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But let's not get bogged down in like definitions. Why do people get addicted to social media? Is it really an addiction?
It's interesting to look at. I think we should try to maybe first understand what addiction is.
Okay.
Neither of us claim any expertise on this. We are just trying to figure this out ourselves.
Yeah.
But Himal, do you want to look at this definition?
Sure. Okay. So, according to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, addiction is a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction in these circuits lead to a characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. This is reflected in an individual pathologically pursuing reward and/or relief by substance use and other behaviors.
So I guess what we should figure out is whether people seek some sort of a reward by using, by engaging with these platforms, and whether that keeps them hooked.
Yeah, I think the American Psychiatric Association goes on to say that over time, people with addiction build up a tolerance to
Right.
that addiction.
Right. Okay.
In that they need larger amounts to continue to feel those effects,
Right.
to keep getting
Okay.
that high. They need more
Yeah.
and more of it.
Yeah. So, okay, I think I can actually relate to it because a couple of years back, there was a time when I felt like, all the notifications from Facebook, for example, that you get.
That's a notification you just heard on Tamara's iWatch.
Yeah, like
That's how connected he is.
they seemed like they seemed overwhelming and intimidating, but then a little time passed by and I didn't really mind them. I was basically waiting for something to happen on Facebook.
Right.
I've now outgrown that phase, thankfully.
How have you outgrown it?
Well, it took a lot of effort actually. I went on to disable all my notifications on the all the social media app notifications on the phone. I disabled my newsfeed.
Right.
And unfollowed everyone and every page on Facebook. So let's actually get to these these tips and tricks to curb this addiction, towards the end of the episode, I guess, so that it
Yeah.
could help.
If we are calling it an addiction.
Yeah,
that is,
yeah, sure. I mean, it could help some others as well. So
Yeah.
if they're struggling with this.
I mean, I don't want. I mean, let me just say at the outset that at least in my case, I'm not trying to dispense any advice here, because that would be utterly hypocritical of me, given my usage of social media. But these are things that I've also been doing some research, and I'm really looking into this because I want to be rid of this horrible condition, I would say, where I'm constantly seeking validation / social proof /
Right.
some kind of reward mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get into that later.
Yeah, I think that there have been studies that show each time that you hear that ping, that notification sound, there's a rush of dopamine.
Yeah, there is. Even when you see that red notification on
Exactly.
Facebook, there's a rush of dopamine. I think Facebook is designed that way also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an indication that notification icon is an indication of indication that some person on the internet has taken some kind of interest in what you had to say.
Right.
So then that kind of urges you to have a look and see what they've said. I think.
I remember reading somewhere that Facebook actually delays those notifications sometimes.
Right.
So that you keep refreshing, so that you keep going back
Right.
just to see if you got those notifications, or whether you've got to see if you got that like or that comment.
Okay.
And that actually sounds pretty sinister to me, but
yeah, I mean, they could be doing that. Their incentive is to keep people on the
just
platform.
to keep eyeballs on their
Yes.
platform for as long as possible.
So yeah, then I mean, I guess we can safely say that social media is addicting.
Right.
Even if we go by these strict medical definitions, then at least in part, these platforms have contributed to creating a sort of addictive behavior patterns in people who use them, I think. Why do you think they are doing this? Why do you think these companies constantly seek their users' attention, and why do they want users to stay on the platform and engage with what's there?
The obvious answer would be that they want to sell our attention to advertisers.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that thing about there's this maxim, it's almost a cliche at this point, that if a service is free, you're the product.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that is true actually. If you take Facebook for example, the user is not their customer. Their customer is the company who buys ads from them.
Right.
So what they want to do is basically make sure that those companies, those ads that they place get the eyeballs that they pay for.
Don't forget all the data that
Oh,
they
sure.
are
Yeah.
collecting and selling to
Yes.
the highest bidder.
And it's how business has evolved as well. I think companies no longer want just your money; they want your attention.
Right.
Even after you paid for a service or for a purchase, they still want you to come back and engage with what they share, and in turn they hope that you will be stimulated to buy another time, consume their service another time.
So in other words, this has resulted in an attention economy of sorts, where your attention has become a scarce commodity. Right?
That's true. Yeah, of course. I think somebody said attention is a resource. A person only has so much of it.
Right.
So companies, what they try to do is try to get as much of your attention to their product, to whatever they sell. I mean, it's kind of hypocritical of me to say this. I do this every day with my company, with the content that we produce.
Right.
We don't stop at just selling a product. We then make videos without featuring our customers, and
let's talk about that, Tamara. Why do you do that? Why you're in the business of selling T-shirts and socks?
Yeah.
Why do you interview people? Why am I seeing Aisha, who I really like? why am I seeing her on your YouTube channel?
Right. So it's like this. This attention economy, I do not fully agree with all the manifestations of it.
Right.
But then I do think that there is a proper way to do it. We think that there's a proper way to ask for your attention, ask for consumers attention, and then in turn their money to ask them to come and buy from us. But let's keep.
Did you just plug your company somewhere?
let's move on, Himan. Let's move on.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So, uh, coming back to attention, I also want to mention that I think we can all agree our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. How many people want to read a long form blog post on a website when compared it to watching a 2 minute video of the same thing, like deconstructing the same thing. People want to fed a lot of information and a lot of data in a very short time,
Yeah.
because I mean it's sometimes a misconception. I think they think they don't have the time to properly pay attention to something and understand it.
I don't think it's so much a lack of time as it is a lack of focus.
Yeah.
That's how it has been for me anyway. Like,
Right.
I used to I used to read quite a bit. Now lately it's a struggle for me to read like a 2,000 word piece, for example. I keep toggling between tabs, I find sometimes. To touch on what you said, Professor Cal Newport, who authored this book called Deep Work.
Yeah.
I think it was about focusing.
Yeah.
He said that he's a guy who, by the way, is not on any social media. He doesn't have an account on any social networking site.
Right.
He said on a recent TED talk that that our brains are not wired to receive that much as much stimulation as we get from social media.
Right.
This constant barrage of rewards in the form of notifications that we constantly receive. Our brains are not wired for that, which could short circuit the brain in a certain way.
Right. Okay.
And according to him, that's what leads to this lack of focus that a lot of us are experiencing now.
Right. Okay.
Which sounds quite dangerous,
Yeah.
frankly. Yeah. So there are like actual cognitive consequences to this. Like I guess some people, I have personally experienced this, where there's like a background hum in your head, where you're kind of like the latest joke that you tweeted or the latest post that you posted on picture that you posted on Instagram. It's like you're kind of visualizing it in your head, and you can kind of see the comments, and I think it's a direct consequence of this, and Newport has alluded to this in his book.
Right.
It's something that I think we all of us need to be mindful of.
Right. And if I may extrapolate on the same thing that you mentioned about how receiving more information does not help us in the way that we think. I think there have been research done on this by economists. This is a slightly on different topic, but people tend to somehow think that the more information you have about something, you can make better decisions. But it turns out you actually can't do that. There's an information overload. Yes. Okay. There's a limit to what you can process.
Right.
So if you pass that limit, whatever that comes into your brain after that point does not really get processed, and you don't come to better decisions or conclusions because of that excess information that you receive.
You mean in terms of information we see on social media, or any information?
Any kind of information.
Any kind of information. So even if you read a book.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I think the research was done with betting.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. So some people were given, betting on horse races, basically.
Okay.
So they were given differing amounts of information about, the horses and the jockeys who rode them, their past performances and all that stuff. And there was a limit to what people could process. And the people who had the best information did not necessarily make the best decisions when it came to what they bet on. So yeah, I think the same principle applies to this, and it's worse, I think, because most of what you see on, for example, if you go on Twitter, is junk, is worthless bullshit, right? I mean, it doesn't really add any value to your life.
I mean, that really depends on who you follow.
True. But then again, okay, so give me an example of what is something that you would really find useful from someone on Twitter.
Well, I work in the media, so for me it's quite useful to be on Twitter, because it's a handy way to keep myself up to date on what's going on.
Right. Sure.
For one thing.
Oh, yeah, that I agree.
And I mean, I don't think this is limited to my profession either. If you want to network with people, getting online is pretty much the only way these days.
True.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very useful tool to do that.
You could miss out on a lot of things if you're not on social media.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's always the case, because again, going back to Cal Newport, he has said that this is a common argument for social media, right?
Right.
That
Because the social conversation nowadays
Yeah.
happens on social media.
right,
And if you're not there, you're missing out.
Right.
Basically. So I think this is called FOMO, right?
Yeah, the fear of missing out, yeah.
Well, it's I guess there's a certain truth to it, but then again, you really have to figure out
what your priorities are, I
what you
suppose,
yeah, basically, like, I mean, what you basically really need to do with your life, right? I mean,
Right. So here's what I've done. I have, like you, I've disabled my notifications on my
Right.
smartphone. I don't get Twitter or Instagram or Facebook notifications unless I go in and look for it. I do still check Twitter and Facebook from time to time, but what I've tried to do is like set aside a time of day, maybe like in the morning, or maybe like after work, or maybe
Right.
on my lunch break.
right, okay.
And that way, I guess you still don't really miss anything, right?
Mm.
You can catch up on
True.
what's been going on.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you can catch up on the conversation.
Yeah.
Is that you think that's a useful advice?
Yeah,
or-
I think, I mean, that's a pretty good way to manage that, I think.
Right.
So you're basically using time blocking to this. You have a set time in the day to check on, what your friends are up to, or maybe to
Right.
get your news, which I think is a productive way of going about it. So I think you are much better off when it comes to the problem that we want to focus on today. Like, you've moved on from being, wanting to constantly be simulated by
I mean,
what you get on
I
social
don't
media.
I don't know that I've moved on completely.
Right.
I think I'm hoping that I'm getting there.
Right. Do you feel like you're getting better at managing those?
No, it's like
urges?
this. I broke my phone recently, and I was without a phone for about 2 weeks. And in that period of time, I think I may have undergone some kind of transformation. In that, like now I've got a new smartphone now, and I don't find myself reaching for it as often as I used to. I don't know if that means I'm on the mend.
But then
it could
it's-
just be that I've kind of gotten used to being without
Mm.
accessing the internet so much. It could be
Right.
that.
Right.
There's nothing stopping me from relapsing, I think. But I'm taking a concerted effort to not do it. I spend, like, today, for example, I on my way to work, instead of checking Twitter, I just listen to my podcasts.
Okay.
What I'm hoping to do these days is just to like restrict my social media usage to my laptop.
Right. Okay.
Don't get
That's
on
pretty good.
social media on my phone at all. It's not as hard as you might think, actually.
True. I think that's a good way to go about it. Especially if you're worried about your privacy,
Right.
then using your laptop alone without using a phone gives you a better advantage at it, because then, like, the information that these apps can collect on you becomes limited.
You mean in terms of location and things
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that? Okay.
So I think that's why I've seen a lot of people advocating for deleting their Facebook app completely on the phone, and if you want to get on Facebook using your desktop computer, stuff like that.
Have you considered going cold turkey, like deleting all your social media altogether?
Not really. For the most part, I remain an optimist, even if I see that there are definitely, bad that can be done using social media, and bad effects. that
There's
it
no
has.
arguing that social
Yeah.
media is harmful, but there are some good things.
Pretty good things as well. So what I try to do is, be responsible myself
Right.
in how I use it. So I never really want to get off social media completely, because, like you said, much of the important conversations we have in the society today happen on social media, and I don't want to be left out. I want to be, even if I don't take part actively, I want to see what people think and where things go. So I don't really want to get off completely.
Right. I think there are a number of positives. I think another big one is whenever there's a disaster or natural disaster,
sure.
it's a good way to like reach out to people and
Yes. Yeah.
organize,
Yes.
and it's also a great communication tool. It's I mean, all of my friends are on Facebook and on Messenger especially.
Mm.
I this day and age, I wouldn't know what to do without Messenger.
Sure.
I mean, you can, I suppose, use Messenger alone without Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, as a communication tool, all these platforms do a really good job.
Yeah.
There's a person that I follow on Twitter. What he basically says is you have to get to a point where you can use these platforms on your own terms
Right.
without being addicted to all the all the distractions, all the escapism and the distractions that they
Right.
offer.
Is it Thomas Frank?
No, it's a Sri Lankan guy.
Oh, right,
We can
okay.
actually say his name, I guess.
Okay.
It's Adnan.
Oh, right. Okay.
So what he basically, I mean, so like you said, we can, if we want to reach out to a friend and see how they're doing, or have a conversation, get something done, then of course you can go ahead and use something like Facebook, which is pretty convenient to use. You don't have to know their phone number or their email or whatever. But then something you can do on the other side to minimize distractions is to at the same time disable your newsfeed.
You've done that, right?
I've done that. Yeah.
Could you tell us how you did it?
So yeah, again, thanks to Adnan, because he has written a script which for Google Chrome, basically you can run the script on Chrome and it will unfollow all your friends on Facebook. So what unfollow means is they will still stay your friend. You're not unfriending them, but when you unfollow them, you don't get their updates. Like you don't get their photos or posts that they do on the profile in your newsfeed. You don't see that in your newsfeed.
Have you unfollowed everyone?
I have unfollowed everyone and
rude.
every page. Because I mean, I don't know. I don't want to know what you ate for lunch. I mean, I know that you don't.
I don't talk about what I ate
post,
for
yeah,
lunch.
a bad example. But but I don't want to know where they went over the long weekend or whatever.
No, I understand. I hear what you're saying. But the thing is, though, again, getting back to this whole FOMO thing, if you disable your news feed, how are you going to have your finger on the pulse, so to speak?
So for that, I mainly use Twitter.
Okay.
On Twitter, you can make lists, right?
Right.
And then what you can basically do is say you can make a list of all the journalists that you follow,
Right.
foreign journalists and maybe local journalists. And then if you follow British comedy, for example, then you can make a list of all the comedians you follow, so stuff like that.
Okay.
So then when you want to see what's happening there, when you want to see what the latest thing that Maithripala said, that
President Maithripala Sirisena, thank you.
that's pissing off everyone, you go to the relevant list
Right.
of Sri Lankans that you follow, maybe. So there are like tweaks that you can do to, I mean, these platforms have offered you those options. It's just that most people don't know how to use them.
No, that does sound like a good strategy, except that, at least in my case, in my experience, the conversations are sometimes different on Facebook and on Twitter. They're not always the same.
Right. Okay. So there is a mental leap that you have to make here, which I have made, and from what I'm hearing, maybe you have not. Is that I don't really give a shit about I mean, obviously things that are.
No, but I don't mean like personal posts like what somebody ate for lunch. I mean like actual conversations surrounding current affairs, for example.
Those things, what I find is they will reach me anyway somehow.
Okay.
Maybe I'll hear it, hear two people talking on the bus, or a friend will mention it to me during a conversation.
Right.
And I'm not really worried about missing things out when they happen on social
Okay.
media. For example, these memes that go around.
Right.
I'm not equating memes to important things that happen, but as an example,
One could argue that memes are pretty
Yeah.
important.
yeah, sure. So I don't really always know what the latest trending meme is,
Right.
because I don't want to know. It doesn't really add any value to my life.
Okay.
It doesn't grow my wealth. It doesn't grow my it doesn't improve my mental well-being. It doesn't do anything to me. So I've
Okay.
made that leap where I don't really give a shit about all the I guess one way you can put this is stop focusing on dumb shit.
Right.
So I just focus on what I do and what matters to me,
Okay.
which could sound a little selfish and narcissistic, but
No, I mean it
then
makes
again,
sense.
yeah.
I don't know that I could do it personally. I feel like disabling your newsfeed is a tad extreme.
Right.
But again, going back to what I said earlier, I think for me at least the best strategy is to maybe allocate a certain amount of time
Right.
every day to to
Yeah.
go back and browse and see what you've been missing out on.
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
That way you don't miss out entirely on the conversation.
Right.
Assuming it's important to you to
Mm.
know what's going on.
Sure. Yeah.
But like you said, maybe you don't really need to. Maybe you don't really care.
99% of the things that happen doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is pretty mundane,
Yeah.
admittedly. But there is the odd gem
Mm.
in there, right? There's
So what I found out, like I mentioned, since I disabled the newsfeed,
right.
is that the important things will reach me anyway. So I haven't been missing out on anything in that sense. So it has worked out for me. But I don't know if for a journalist that will be the best way to go about it. I don't know.
Oh, forget journalism. I mean, you're into comedy, right?
Yeah.
A lot of comedic content that's being produced today is very self-referential, very meta, very. It's constantly making references to what's trending on the internet.
Mm.
Don't you feel like you maybe not get the joke sometimes if you're not privy to
I do.
what's
I do.
okay?
But it doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter to
Yeah.
you. Okay.
So I mean, it might sound like a weird place to be in, but then I've gotten used to that. I've gotten used to, not being worried about not getting the latest joke that's being made, or not seeing the latest meme that's going around. So yeah, I've made that leap somehow.
But you are on Twitter, so you see that stuff anyway.
Yeah,
Right?
I do see most of the stuff.
Right.
But for example, when this moth memes started going around, I
What
didn't
meme?
moth.
Oh, the moth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't necessarily know what it meant until I
Yeah.
met you, and you talked about how it originated on Twitter and on Reddit, and how it got around.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for making me sound very knowledgeable about memes now. Yeah.
yeah. So
Something I really want to be known for. Yeah.
Himal, the meme king.
Yeah. Sure.
So let's come back to the business side of things a bit, I guess. Because as we alluded to earlier, these platforms and these companies like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, what they want to do is to keep users on their platforms
For as long
to
as possible.
yeah, and to serve their advertisers. Not only that, this model is actually being funded heavily and encouraged in ecosystems like Silicon Valley, for example. The performance and the success of your app is measured by daily active users, which is one metric these VCs and funders who want to invest in your business ask you about and want to know about. So the more people keep coming back to your app and the more people keep using it, that's how you get funding. That's when you basically become a success story. So the infrastructure has been built around this model, and I think if someone wants to go against that, that will be a pretty hard thing to do.
You mean like charging for their content, for
Yeah.
example?
So that's why a website that produces content would rather have that all out there for free, and then instead of asking people to pay for the content that they consume on that website, they ask for advertisers to fund that content.
I don't fundamentally have a huge problem with that model because I think it has helped democratize production and creativity.
But there's a cost
The
to it.
No, there's an obvious cost to it in that you never know when somebody is shilling for a company or something, right?
Exactly.
That's a risk you're going to have to take. But I think because of this current model, more and more people have access to a lot of this content, whereas they might not have otherwise.
Right.
So I think that's we need to kind of find a balance there, right?
Sure. Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, it's not like we can, kick out advertisers tomorrow.
True,
and
true. I mean, if you're producing content and getting an advertiser on board kind of compromises your integrity, that to me as a consumer, that should be a point of concern.
Yes.
But at the same time, if I'm not willing to, if I'm unable to pay for that content, I won't have any content to consume in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
By the way, chicken and egg is not a problem. I mean, the fucking egg came first from a bird who was not a chicken.
Thanks.
Let's cut that out.
That's anti-joke chicken for you.
One thing that I do want to mention here is, I don't know if you heard about the pay what you can model.
Yeah.
So I've seen.
Is that like a subscription model?
It's. I mean, some people use it as a subscription model.
Some podcasters.
Some
use
podcasters
that, I
do.
think. Yeah.
What you basically do is, if you like the content that someone is producing, for example, if you like a certain podcast or a YouTube channel, what you as consumers can do, and I think what you should do, is directly support those creators.
Right.
So then, I mean, if enough people start doing this, then they have a reason not to rely on advertisers. I mean, it's a very simple transaction, right? People consume your content, they like it, they pay for it. It's a practical business model, and
Yeah.
I surely understand that not every person who wants to consume the content can pay for it.
Right.
So I've seen some creators say this thing where, I mean, if what you can pay is just $1 for a month, then pay that. If you can pay 50 or 500 per month, then you do that. I mean, so what happens is they will still get funded by people who have more to give than
Right.
some others,
Right.
and it still democratizes
Yeah.
the distribution as well.
I mean, when we don't think twice about paying when we're buying a book, for example,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like when we purchase any good or service, any physical good or service, we pay for it without thinking twice about it.
Yeah.
But
And you pay like fucking 450
exactly.
rupees for a cup of coffee at
but when
coffee
when it comes to digital content, suddenly like people
has
are
to be
almost
free.
entitled.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it needs to be people. There's this expectation that it has to be free.
Yeah.
And that's I think for a lot of content creators that's a problem.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's a big history to this, I think, which we don't have the time to talk about today, but this started with these services like Napster, and then
Right.
coming to torrenting, and I mean, how many people buy movies here in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
including you and I, we
Right.
torrent stuff, right?
Really?
So,
You do?
I don't know. I actually got Netflix
Okay.
recently, so which I feel good about myself now.
I don't torrent movies. I watch movies that have been torrented for me by my friends.
Okay, and how does that make?
So I
you
feel a little
think?
less guilty about it. Like the
Yeah.
crime has already been committed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You can always pay for your music
Yeah.
with services like Spotify, Apple Music.
No, but I think it's a separate debate to be had about whether or not
True.
information needs to be free. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
it's
So,
there are philosophical implications to that question, I
Mm.
think. But yeah, so where were we about social media?
So we were talking about how these social media platforms are incentivized to
Oh, right.
always keep people on their platforms.
And how they manipulate and yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
For example, if you go on YouTube, there's an autoplay
Yeah.
option there, right? Which is,
Yeah.
I think, by default turned on.
Yeah.
And if you don't realize it, you come to the end of one video, and in like 5 seconds you get to the next video in that playlist.
Yeah.
And for some reason your brain also wants to keep going,
Hmm.
and then you just end up in a totally different place
Yeah.
afterwards.
I think because 99% of the time it is something you want to watch, right?
Yeah.
The next video
I
is
mean,
always
it
something you want to
feels
watch.
like
It
something
feels
you
that
want to
way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of brilliant. I mean, if you think about it,
Yes.
the way they are able to manipulate you like that. It's the other day I was watching something on Daily Show clip or something, and then there's before I knew it, I had binged like so many episodes of
Right.
that and other related shows
Right.
like the Colbert Report, for example. Sorry, the Late Show with Colbert. And yeah, so it is true that these companies are basically doing everything they can to keep your attention locked at all times, right?
I mean, there are they've invested so much in it,
Right.
in the algorithms that choose the videos that you
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and all that, and they have within their product teams they have people who decide what color should you have on the button so that more people will
Right,
click on
right,
it, stuff
right.
like that. There's this guy, his name is Tristan Harris.
Right.
He used to work at Google, and I think he was the design ethicist
Hmm.
at Google. He basically looked at ethical ways of keeping people's attention on their platforms, and how to design products around that. And then he quit Google, and he started his own movement called Time Well Spent. So now
Yeah, I remember that.
what he tries to do is,
I think he came on Sam Harris's
yeah,
podcast.
he was on the podcast. Yeah. He tries to he basically runs awareness campaigns and movements.
On what? On the evils of social media.
Well, not necessarily the evils, but
That's what this guy's been doing. Chamat, what's his name?
Palipite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like he's going around giving interviews,
Yes.
talking about how much he regrets. I think.
Investing in Facebook.
Yeah.
Or being
yeah,
part of
yeah.
the Facebook team.
I mean, it feels like a lot of these tech bro types, they make their billions and then they grow a guilty conscience and then they're like, oh my god, this is so bad. This is
But
bad
then
for
again, the thing
society.
is, so if you take something like Facebook or Google, for example, it took them a long time to realize what they're actually doing to people's attention and
Facebook.
their behavior. Facebook and
Right.
Google even. Because I mean, in the beginning they were just like two or three dudes who wanted to make something that people use and love. They
Mm.
didn't really think about the large implications of those, right? And then obviously they got the funding and they got the people to work with them, and they were having fun, I guess. And they didn't realize that there were a lot of things that they didn't think about in terms of how people were actually using their platforms, and what kind of an impact that it had on their lives. So I guess, I mean, I wouldn't really say that they were, set out to be evil or anything like that. It's just that they didn't really see the full picture in the beginning.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's especially relevant these days in the light of what's been happening in America.
Yeah.
And Zuckerberg has been accused of. I mean, I feel like you're being a little generous to Facebook here.
Right.
I'm not. I mean, I don't think that they were malicious, like you said, but it has been pointed out for quite some time now. Like, for example, if you take hate speech in countries like Sri Lanka, if you take the Digana incident, for example, a lot of it was a result of what was going on online, right?
Yeah.
And people had reported it, and Facebook didn't really take any action against it. But I think now maybe they are coming to terms with it. They are making a genuine effort to understand, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think so. And it does look like, didn't a team from Facebook recently visit the
They
country?
did.
And
But from what I understand, at least initially, Facebook had kind of declined to take any action against some of those posts, and Facebook
right.
groups the hateful posts and everything.
I mean, I myself.
That is not against their
Yeah.
rules.
So yeah, what those platforms have failed to realize is that they are not just facilitators of conversation.
Right.
They amplify a lot of things that should not be amplified.
Right.
Which, things that come from vocal minorities
Right.
that really should not get any attention.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's actually my problem with social media. The fact that they amplify a lot of things.
But don't they have an obligation to? I mean, I don't want to get into a free speech debate here, but doesn't Facebook have an obligation to monitor what's being posted? And I mean, it is being monitored.
Yeah.
I think
do something about
I think
it.
the criticism is that they're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And
Things that are intentionally things like fake news, which I think Facebook really has the capacity to monitor and do the fact checking and take steps so that they don't get syndicated. Things like that I think should really become their priority, because especially I think they are doing something about
didn't
it.
Mark declare kind of like a war against fake news or something recently?
I think they're trying to basically get the community to validate the news itself.
Right.
So you can report on. I don't think they have implemented any of these tools in Sri Lanka, but maybe they've tested it in some US communities.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do as a platform to make sure that the information that you put out, that your users put out, are actually validated and not intentionally misleading. So they've really missed out on that.
Speaking of that, though, I mean, we always hear about how social networks they have this echo chamber effect to them, right? And the algorithm is designed in such a way, especially on Facebook, so that it only shows you things that you already agree with.
Yes.
Right, viewpoints that you already identify with.
Yes.
So in light of that, one of the strongest criticisms against Facebook is that it has, especially in this current political climate that we're living in, that it creates divisions. Well, and assuming that the echo chamber effect is true, and Facebook only gives you content that you already agree with, how can you say that it's divisive?
So okay, two things here. The first thing is that I want to say that it's not just Facebook. Even a simple Google search,
Right.
whatever absurd viewpoint that you hold on something, if you search for it on Google, there are some other people who have the same viewpoint and who validate that for
Right.
you. So it's not just a Facebook phenomenon. I think it's all over the internet.
Right.
The internet as a whole, if you want it to act as an echo chamber for whatever you hold true in your mind, I think I would like to believe that there is a certain potential in platforms like Facebook or any other social platforms to help people change their minds, help people come out of absurd things that they believe in. But I don't know if that really works that way.
Yeah,
on the
like
internet.
on Facebook, I mean, I'm guilty of this myself. Like,
Yeah.
we engage in debates and arguments all the time, and I don't know how productive any of them. Like I don't
Sure.
think anyone really ends up changing their mind in the end. You just
Right.
walk away angrier than you already were.
Yes. So I think Pew Research has done something a study on this,
Okay.
and what they said was, so this is based in the US. I'm
Right.
really not sure what the numbers are for Sri Lanka. It says 14% of Americans have changed their mind about an issue because of something they saw on social media. So that's
That's a pretty low
a
number.
low number,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that when you come across differing viewpoints, you tend to really double down on what you believe
Yeah.
in, and not open your mind
Right.
about something. So
Do you mean people get more defensive, right?
They
And
get
when
defensive,
they're presented with more facts or arguments.
yeah.
Yeah.
And something that I've seen myself is most of these debates that we have on Twitter or Facebook or whatever,
Right.
they quickly, people quickly resort to ad hominems, and then
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
goes down drain.
It
after
just
that.
gets very personal
Yeah.
all too quickly, right? I don't engage in arguments at all online.
You've seen
anymore.
your fair share of
Yeah.
arguments.
I mean, people still comment and like say random shit, but I don't really respond to that.
Yeah,
It's kind of not worth my time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm not gonna. Let's face it. I'm not gonna convince anybody, right? You're set in your ways. I'm set in my ways.
But I do want to mention something that I've seen as very effective. This subreddit called "or Change My View,"
Oh yeah, I've been there quite a bit.
which I think was started by a young kid, like in his 20s or something, and he basically thought people have the potential to engage in
Right.
in productive debate, and then he made this subreddit, and what you can basically do is you can go there and post something that you firmly believe in,
Mm-hmm.
and you basically ask people to change your mind about it.
So it's like a challenge, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
It's, I mean, it is kind of a challenge, but
For example, if I think socialism is the answer, I could maybe ask you. I could challenge you to change my view.
Exactly,
Like, okay.
yeah. But then again, the problem there is for someone to go out there and do that, for them to go to a platform like that, to a forum like that, and then ask people to challenge their viewpoint. That person is, not the standard troll that you see everywhere on the internet. That person is a bit more evolved. Like, he is willing to
Right.
change his mind
Right.
or her mind. So it's not for everyone. It's I mean, it doesn't work on everyone, I guess.
Right. Let's talk about trolls.
Right. Okay.
Like, what is your understanding of trolls or trolling behavior?
Well, I do know a couple of people who are trolls.
As in
online.
they claim to be trolls? Or
No,
they-
like, they engage in a lot of trollish behavior online,
Okay.
and I know them personally,
Right.
and they have a lot of insecurities.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a simple correlation, or if it's the case with
Like when you
everyone.
say troll, like how do you mean? Are they constantly like trying to rile people up?
Yeah,
or-
exactly.
Okay.
So that basically just that.
Right.
Whatever they post, and even when they comment on someone else's photos or posts or
Okay.
whatever, it's just with the sole intention of driving them angry, or making them defensive for the sake of it. What's your reading of it?
I mean, yeah, I kind of agree. I have been accused of being a troll myself.
Okay.
I think a troll is somebody who just kind of says provocative things for the sake of it, just to get a rise out of people, right?
If that is the definition of troll, then I can see.
I respectfully disagree. I don't think I could, because I mean, 90% of the time, I kind of rightly or wrongly, I believe what I say,
Right. Okay.
and I could be completely wrong
Well,
on a certain topic, but I'm willing to defend my position, right?
Maybe it's how you word it, I guess.
Right. Well, I don't use enough emojis. Is that it?
No, I mean, just people can glean a certain tone of voice from what you write, and maybe it just doesn't really. It rubs off some people in the wrong way, I guess. So
Yeah, that's another thing with social media, right? You can never tell what the other person
Yeah.
is thinking,
Yeah.
and you can't tone is always not easy to discern, right? Online, and this whole thing about intent versus
Impact.
impact.
Yes, exactly. So I heard this a couple of weeks back from this was on the Sam Harris podcast. He was interviewing this evolutionary psychologist called Jonathan Haidt, and he made a very interesting point that has stuck in my mind ever since. What he said was people don't really care for your intent when they see something that you posted on social media or something that you said. It used to be that if you, for example, by mistake offended someone or hurt someone, you could just go to them and apologize and say that it was unintentional, make a sincere apology basically, and then they will understand and they will move on. But now with the internet increasingly getting very PC and all that, if you hurt someone and if something that you say is interpreted in the wrong way by someone else, they don't really care about what you actually intended. It's the impact that you caused that matters. So yeah, I mean, it's not. I just want to go ahead and say that that's not the world that I want to live in.
But there is some truth to that, though, right? It kind of makes sense. You can apologize all you want, but if the damage is already done, then what use is that?
Well, then okay, then how do you make jokes about something anymore? Then when that kind of policing is expected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing this criticism a lot. One argument I think that's being presented is that comedy should also evolve.
Right. Okay.
Like if somebody says it's no longer okay to make jokes about sexual assault, for example, I think comedians should maybe take it as a challenge as opposed to some kind of restriction. I mean, I'm all for freedom of speech. That said, I don't think people should be penalized for like having an opinion or making an offhand remark on the internet, right? Because Lord knows what I could be accused of, given the shit I have posted over the years on it.
Right.
And I mean, that's another thing, though, right? In real life, like, you're constantly evolving, right? Your viewpoints are constantly evolving and changing. But on the internet, on Twitter, for example, there's a permanent record of that, right? And if somebody wants to, they can just go back like 5-6 years ago and point at something and take it completely out of context and say, look, you were being a jerk here, you were being a racist, you were being a sexist, or whatever.
I actually think that is a stupid thing to do, because I personally think that changing your mind is a sign of intelligence.
Right.
And if you attack someone for having a different opinion sometime back, like you said, people change their minds and their opinions evolve. But that's not really what I'm talking about here. It's if like humor, for example, sometimes there is a person or a thing that you make fun of. That's what makes it funny.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that depends on how you define humor. Is it humor? Does it always have to be at
I
the
mean,
expense of somebody else?
Not always. Sometimes.
Yeah.
So then, if you have,
I mean, a lot of the time it is, though, right?
Yeah. It can be yourself.
Right.
So if you are if you're a transgender person,
right,
making fun of yourself, then I mean, does it really make sense for me to want that person to police themselves because it hurts my feelings?
No, of course not. That would be silly.
So then, okay, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But is there any kind of conversation about that? Are people saying that transgender people should not joke about themselves?
No, that was just an example.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, like, people say that you can't make jokes about sexual orientation, about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, right? There are some topics that people don't want you to touch, and they get really offended when you do.
Right. But can a Jewish person make a Holocaust joke?
I guess. I mean, I've heard a lot of them do that.
Okay.
So yeah,
okay,
I mean, I do understand that people have their own sensibilities when it comes to these topics.
Right.
If you're someone who lost your whole family in the Holocaust, then you may not find that funny. But I don't know. I mean, I don't have an answer or a solution to this. But it's something that people need to talk about. Right?
It's also because I think today feedback is immediate, right? Like a famous comedian or whatever put something out there, and then he could either be praised or thrashed for it instantly. Yeah. That's one more aspect of social media, I think, in that it makes a celebrity out of pretty much anyone. And which brings us, I guess, to the topic of influencers. Talk about influencers.
Let's talk about that, because I mean, we don't even have to go to influencers. If you just take you and I or anyone else who uses social media regularly, what we post there, what we talk about there, are not really real reflections of our life. It's like a highlight reel.
Yeah.
I could have 0 rupees in the bank, and if I post a photo of my iPhone and I don't know, something like that, and I'm just trying to like paint a picture that is not real. And I think most people do this. It's one way to, sort of show other people that you're better off, basically, even if they don't intend it that exact same way. There's a certain, element of narcissism in it, I think.
It is, yeah. Social media, I guess, is inherently narcissistic, but
Yeah.
but it's become so normalized that I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing anymore.
So,
like it's
yeah, let me give you a quick example. A friend of mine talked to me a couple of days back, and she said she's still studying, I think, in university. She said she's constantly intimidated by seeing all the stuff that her friends post. Some of them have got married. They go to their honeymoon in the Maldives, and some of them have got kids. Some got their, I don't know, got their PhD or whatever. Like, she's intimidated by all these other people's achievements, and she really finds it. She has become really insecure because of that.
I think that's something we can all relate to,
Yeah.
or to a lesser or greater extent.
So
like-
that, I think, that's a really bad place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could ask, advise people to be more mindful of that, but we're all human, right? I mean, you see something and that's just human nature, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess, but basically the role of social media in this is that
It's to what make you feel inadequate.
it amplifies these things.
Right.
It basically invites people to like and comment on what other people are doing with their lives, and that can really manifest in ways that you don't realize are very bad for you. It can drive you towards depression or
Yeah, but like you said, it is a highlight reel, and it's good to be
Yeah.
mindful of that fact.
Yeah.
I don't think personally I'm not intimidated by what people, I mean, their social lives or whatever. But there is one thing I am intimidated by, though. That is, I find myself constantly comparing myself with other people in terms of how smart they are. Like, whereas I guess some people would look at somebody's looks or whatever, I'm intimidated by their smarts. Holy shit, this guy sounds really smart and knowledgeable, and
I can relate.
yeah, and they seem to really have it together, and
Yeah.
then that is that I find myself comparing myself to that constantly. I'm trying to move on from that. I'm trying to not do that anymore, but it's not
Right.
easy.
Oh, true. I struggle with that too.
I guess that comes with age. I guess when I was a little younger, maybe I was comparing myself with other people's financial successes or things like
Right.
that. But
Okay.
whereas now it's more to do with the intellect. But there is a constant comparison, and that I don't think that's very healthy, because you end up
True.
putting yourself down.
True.
Right?
Yeah, and if we come to influencers, I think that's this same scenario amplified tenfold.
Yeah.
So what those people do we need to try to define who influencers are and
I
what
think
they do?
everybody knows what it is.
So basically, what they try to do is try to advertise this lifestyle that most people, even if they wanted to, realistically cannot afford, cannot aspire to, and they try to normalize it with all the, I don't know, it could be clothes, it could be
Food,
it could be gadgets or whatever.
But let's not forget that that lifestyle is afforded to them because of the products they endorse and the companies that they help promote.
Yeah, and I mean that's what people don't realize, I think. So then it becomes an avenue for these companies to sell more stuff to people who consume these influencers' content.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I mean,
Oh, me neither. But
I mean,
then
these
again-
people have a following clearly,
Yeah,
and they are basically paid to promote a product or service to this large number of followers, which is fine, I guess. It's just that sometimes I question the authenticity. I mean, obviously they're shilling for a company.
Yeah.
But I mean, how much? For example, if you take food, how much do they really know what they're talking about? And
yeah, true.
I guess that's another thing that you have to be mindful when you're scrolling down your feed.
This is something I mean, personally, I've struggled with, and I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with using influencers or whatever. And for my own business, we've considered doing that, even if we haven't up to this point. One of the crucial points for me is authenticity.
Right.
I would rather have someone who's actually passionate about my product talk about it than having to pay for it. So I guess that's something that companies can consider doing as well. And then on the part of the consumer, people have to be mindful of the fact that buying more stuff doesn't necessarily make your life better, and
Yeah.
you don't really have to use whatever the exact same thing that these people use. There are alternatives you can look at. So
Yeah, Ajay, it takes us back to this debate about how advertising helps keep a lot of this content free, but at the same time, there's a question of integrity, right?
Yeah.
Sam Harris talked about this recently. He doesn't read ads on his podcast.
He doesn't have advertisers.
Yeah, he asks people to donate if
Yes.
they want to.
Yeah.
His point was that while there's nothing inherently wrong with it, like if you listen to say like an endorsement of Squarespace, for example, or Blue Apron or some kind of mattress, right? And you listen to this when these guys are reading when they're reading their ads, it's pretty clear that they don't really believe what they say, right?
Yeah.
So if they are willing to bend the truth for something like that, how can you guarantee that they won't, try to present a certain point of view in favor of a large corporation, for example, in their podcast?
Exactly.
Like, there's always that question of like, are they compromising their honesty and integrity? And as a consumer, that is something that you should be aware of. I think. Yeah.
True.
But at the same time, it's what helps keep all of this stuff free. A lot of us would not have access to any of this if it weren't for that. If it weren't for this model.
Yeah, I think I agree with you for the most part on that. And another very interesting thing that I want to mention is the fact that social media and the internet as a whole levels the playing field for, especially when it comes to businesses, for example. Even if you are a very small startup with a 2-person team, you can effectively take on a huge incumbent business if you have a good social media strategy. Basically, if you make a good product that people like, and if you can get people to talk about that, you can pose a very considerable threat to an incumbent who is not as creative or not as active on social media as you are. So it really helps to build courses, right? Build movements around something that you believe in, or something that you want to sell.
Is that what they call disrupting?
In a way, yeah. The internet is what, in the past couple of years at least, or in the past, I guess, decades, enabled disruption for most businesses. If you take Uber, for example, what you basically do is book a cab over the internet, right? Or the same can be said about Airbnb or any of these sharing economy apps and websites that basically disrupted big hotel chains and big taxi companies, and now they are thriving in this economy. So, and how consumers basically got to know about these services is, by their, very creative and very active use of social media, and because they were not hesitant to reach these new, these younger audiences and new markets that emerged on these platforms. So I think there's a claim to be made about the use of social media for, especially if you want to launch a business of your own, you definitely need to use social media and the power of the internet, I think.
Okay, here's a question for you. Is everyone equal on the internet?
I don't think so, even though, that would be the ideal scenario. I think the appeal of the internet initially was this, that it gives an equal voice to, it gives a voice to everyone basically. There are no owners of the internet. It's a public property. Anyone can get on it, use it. You don't really have any restrictions on getting into it unless you're in a 5-world country or whatever. But then again, there are obviously people who have gained large followings on the internet and who have a lot of influence, and there are people who don't. So obviously I think these hierarchies that exist in the real world also find themselves onto these social platforms as well. If you take, I don't know, celebrities, for example, or politicians or CEOs of big companies, I guess there is a good chance that they do have a lot of influence on social platforms as well, and they have the potential to drive social conversations towards whatever they want to discuss about, I guess.
But does everyone else have that kind of power on the internet?
No, not really. And
then again, like minorities, for example, like transgender people or minority communities, and they have found a voice on the internet, right? Yeah. So in a way, I guess that makes sense what you're trying to say, that it is kind of equal in that people, it has leveled the playing field somewhat in terms of at least social conversations.
I think even if you, as an individual, you don't have a lot of influence, you can always find similar people to get behind your cause, or you can join their cause, and then as a as a collective, as a movement, then you can have some influence. And the internet has made that easier, I think. For example, the presidential elections in Sri Lanka, which we all know to be, it was influenced a lot by what people had to say on social media.
I mean, I don't know that the actual outcome was a direct result of social media, but yeah, there was. I think it definitely helped. Yeah.
So, I mean, there are big social movements that has happened on social media, and movements that minorities have championed, and as a result of what they did on social media, then it has, trickled down to other areas of society, even policy in some cases.
Social media is great for raising awareness.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember when the U.S. Supreme Court legalized gay marriage, and everybody was changing their profile picture.
Yes.
I mean, there were two ways of looking at it. Like, I mean, you could kind of roll your eyes at like kids being idiots, and but the truth is that it did create some kind of awareness, right? People who didn't necessarily know about it kind of got to know about it, and that's not always a bad thing, right?
It's not.
You can argue about the actual effectiveness of social media campaigns, but at least in terms of getting the word out, I think it's a handy tool.
Stephen Fry has this. He said somewhere he engages a lot of all these online activists and people who try to make changes through the internet, and he says, it's not social change, it's not activism, it's Twitter. So like there are people who kind of are not very convinced about the actual effects of social media and on social media movements in general. But then again, I also think personally that if you want to raise awareness on something, and
I disagree that it doesn't actually have an effect on the real world, because I mean, take the Me Too movement, for example. The Me Too, it's a movement as opposed to a movement, I think. But as a direct result of that, people like there is real change happening in the real world. Like, people are getting fired, for example. We can debate the validity of those decisions separately. That's a separate conversation. But there are real tangible results. I mean, it's all out there for us to see. So in those ways and more, social media has a lot of positives to it. I guess what it comes down to is whether or not the negatives outweigh the positives.
Exactly. Yeah. I myself, I mostly have an optimistic view on things, so I always think that we can use these as tools to do a lot of good. But then again, that requires me to put a lot of faith in everyone who uses these platforms, which I'm not sure if I'm ready to do, because there's a lot of people who will always have their evil agendas to work towards.
Right.
And somehow it seems like social media unfairly amplifies their voices and
Wrongs the others.
affects other people in a bad way.
So is it social media that's the culprit here, or is it the people?
Well, I see social media as an enabler. Like I said, the amplification effects, the virality, the shareability, all that contributes to the spread of either good or bad. I think what people should do as users of these platforms is be more mindful of the fact that there will always be people with malicious intents. And for example, just don't share everything that you see. Try to have informed opinions. Try to find out what's really going on. Spend some time to understand how the world works, I guess. So yeah, I don't really want to. I don't feel good in blaming it all on social media, or the internet, but it does have a huge effect on. But it has certainly contributed to spreading a lot of bad things.
Yeah, because social media clearly has the power to change the discourse.
Yeah.
Politically, for example, and you can see the ripple effects of it all over the world right now. You saw that with the rise of the alt-right in the US. There is rising right-wing sentiments across Europe and elsewhere in the world, right? So, I mean, yes, people do have agency, and people have the power, people have the capacity to educate themselves and be mindful of the tools that they use. but at the same time, I mean, you can't really take the blame away from these big tech companies. I think they do have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And that aside, there is also the addiction fact that we talked about earlier, which is, I think, a huge problem. I think there is like real lasting damage that people may not even realize. And we can blame these companies only to an extent, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's up to us to control the amount of time we spend on these applications. And maybe you want to share with us some tips on how to curb this, quote unquote, addiction.
Yeah, I don't know if, I don't want to call these tips, but these are basically stuff that I've done and stuff that has actually worked for me. So yeah, welcome to try these out, and also like basically let me know if they don't work or if you found better solutions for this. One thing I mentioned earlier also was disabling my Facebook newsfeed, which seems like a drastic measure. When I mentioned this a little while earlier on Twitter also, somebody came to me and said, I don't really want to, basically the argument that you made, I don't want to unfollow everyone on my Facebook because some people still post interesting and useful stuff, and I want to be, I want to engage with those. I obviously get that. So you can make a choice on that. Maybe you can unfollow selectively, I guess, people who don't really post anything useful, or people who post hateful stuff, or people who you find intimidating, for example, I guess. So you can do that selectively if you want to. And then disabling notifications, I think it's a
I think that's an absolute
basic
must.
step that you
it's a step in
probably
the right
should
direction.
do. Because if you set some time in the day to check your social media and go through those notifications, I think that's enough. People don't really expect you to respond in real time to the messages they send or the comments they put in your photos.
That's the thing though, there is this expectation that you're supposed to reply at once, right? It's
okay, that's true. How I dealt with that was, I guess, just by not responding right away. I set this, I manage this expectation where I kind of set a standard where this is, I'm going to respond to you in my own time. If you want something done urgently, then just call me. That's what I basically tell people who expect me to, always be online and be responsive. If you send me an email, I definitely don't respond right away. It could be at night, it could be the next day, it could be the next week. So yeah, you can basically tell the people that you regularly interact with. You can set your own boundaries. For example, you can say, if you want my response, if you want my attention urgently, call me. If you want me to respond whenever I want, then drop me a message on WhatsApp or Messenger, or send me an email. So you can have those conversations with the people that you deal with, and figure out your own way towards this.
Also allocate a slot within your on your schedule within the day,
right,
to check social media.
I
would advise that maybe you don't go on social media in the morning, like first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up, don't reach for your phone. There are more productive things that you could be doing.
I actually do this thing where after I wake up, I don't look at social media or my emails right away, because, for example, if I go on Twitter right away and I see some depressing news, then the whole day feels is off to a bad start. I feel so. I kind of avoid that. I don't really have a set time slot during the day to go on social media. What I do is I limit the total amount of time I spend on it per day. So on iOS, there's this new feature where you can basically say, I only want to spend 1 hour on these set of social media apps or whatever.
Right.
I guess we have similar solutions on other platforms as well. So
there
I think
apps you can use for that.
Yeah, there are apps you can use that kind of sets time restrictions on apps, on other apps. So I use that a lot.
These are not extreme measures, are they? They're like simple, effective things that you can take.
Could, even to me, when I first heard about these things, they did seem like a lot of work to do and huge leaps to make. But once you make up your mind and do it once, and you keep going for a couple of days, then you really feel that you don't need to get on social media all the time.
Right, so
and
I don't recommend going cold turkey, because that's not easy for, like, that's not, I couldn't do it. So I wouldn't recommend that anyone else try it. it's just not easy. It's easier to just kind of like ease into it, like maybe spend some time away from Facebook for a couple of days and then get back, and then go back to it. And
yeah. I mean, if you do want to quit cold turkey, I guess you could try that out and experiment with it. But I wouldn't do it personally myself, like you.
Yeah.
For me, it's more about limiting myself, not pushing them away completely.
So in your case, like I understand you do some of the social media marketing for your company.
Yeah, I mean, it's just two people, so
Right.
We like basically do everything between ourselves.
So do you find yourself spending a fair bit of time online on Twitter, for example, as part of your?
I do less now than it used to be a year or so ago, because back then we were really trying to get the word out to people, and platforms like Twitter and Instagram have been really helpful in building a brand and getting close to the customers that we wanted to be close to, because that's what we built our brand on. So
When you find yourself spending time on Twitter to promote your product, how do you stop yourself from being distracted by what's out there on Twitter? Like, I mean, since we're talking about digital distractions after all.
well, for me, that was fairly easy, because then there were a lot of reasons behind it. I wanted the business to succeed because there was nothing else for me to do, right? I mean, I had a goal to like get, I mean, if I wanted to send messages to 5 different people and try to get them to buy what I had, then I really wanted to do it. So I didn't find it really hard to stop myself from getting distracted. And in my case, what I personally done is I can very well separate my work stuff from my personal engagement on social media or wherever it is. So that's something that I've practiced over the years, so that helped a little, I guess. So when I was using social media to promote the business, I treated it as work, so that helped. I don't know if all that really made any sense, but
No, it makes sense, but I guess also it depends on the individual, right?
yeah, exactly.
I guess not everyone is as organized as you are, I suppose, and you're quite methodical, right?
Yeah, I try to be.
And you kind of like you've organized your day around a schedule, and that's kind of how you live your life, right?
Yeah. And one other thing, like these are like very basic stuff. You can even find a lot of literature on. If you want to deal with your email more effectively, you can try to go towards inbox zero, which is basically at the end of each day you clear out your inbox. You archive all the emails that you might need in the future, but you don't want to clutter up your inbox with, and you delete things that you don't really need.
And if you don't want to delete your social media apps on your phone, you can just take it off your home screen. Just
exactly.
Like put it somewhere that's
put it in a folder.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like hidden away somewhere. Yeah.
Like make it hard for yourself to find it.
It's all about creating that surrounding and that atmosphere where you don't really feel like finding escapism in these things.
Right. Not that there's anything wrong with that, mind you.
Yeah.
It's just that just be mindful of how much time you're spending on it, because I mean I think there are apps to track that also.
Yes.
The amount of time you spend on social media.
Yeah.
Personally, that's not something I want to see, because I don't think I'm ready to see like to confront that yet.
Right.
Because I know that I do spend a scary amount of time on the internet. Just having some vague idea of that is enough for me right now to exercise these measures of control, at least initially, like.
And even these things that we mentioned, don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah.
Like pick one and then experiment with it for a week or so and see if it works for you.
Goes,
That's how building habits work. You have to take things slowly and set very low bars in the beginning, and then try.
Also, there was an article on the New York Times recently about how you could turn your phone into like grayscale, black and white mode.
Yeah.
Apparently, your brain works in such a way that we are like instantly attracted to like colors, like bright colors that kind of pop. So when your phone is on grayscale, you're less likely to like reach for it and like spend time browsing.
Right. Okay. I should try that.
I tried that, and it's actually I found that quite helpful actually.
Okay. One other thing that I've tried is I've completely cleared my home screen of apps on the phone.
Right.
They are in 4 separate folders that I've so this is what works for me. But all the apps that help me with the business that I do are in one folder. All the communication and the social media apps are in one folder. All the productivity apps that I use are in another folder, and the rest is in the fourth folder. So I've disabled notifications for almost everything except the ones that I really need to see. Like for example, if a customer is trying to reach me through the chat application, then of course I need to. That's my work. That's something that I do every day. So that's productive work for me. Those notifications I have enabled because I need to, serve that customer's need. But my personal social media, I've completely disabled notifications, and that really helps because when you don't see all those people's likes and comments and everything constantly coming to your screen, you don't necessarily feel the urge to keep going back anymore. So yeah, I guess disabling notifications is something that everybody can try.
Yeah, step one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right then.
Anything else we want to share?
I think we've spent quite a bit of time on this already. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I have a feeling that people will have very differing opinions on this. There are people who absolutely embrace everything that comes with social media, and we definitely like to hear how you utilize social media for in your own way. So definitely tell us about that. If you have more tips to share about using your time effectively, send us those as well.
Cool. I mean, if you already have the self-control to manage your time that you spend on social media, then the more power to you. But I guess not everyone is that fortunate. So I guess for the rest of us, please. So if you have any tips, please do share.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this episode. Before we end though, I do want to give a shout out to our friends CD Athulya and Miranta Jatilaka. They started their own podcast. It's about tech.
What's it called?
It's called Tech Savvy with CD and Miranta.
Okay.
So they are also on all the platforms that we are on. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Anchor, Stitcher. So all those places, if you search for Tech Savvy with CD and Miranta, you should find
on
them.
Android.
Yeah. They talk about tech. If you're into tech, and if you really want a deep dive into the creation of tech, not just from the consumer side, but from the creator side, definitely give them a listen. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us if you enjoy our talks. You can do that on all those platforms that we mentioned earlier.
And if you have any suggestions on topics that we could cover, please let us know.
Yeah.
Cool. All right then. Catch you guys next week. Peace.